Lord Cocytus, you were cheering quite loudly back there.
Ah, I may have gotten carried away.
Ilishnish glanced over at Lord Cocytus, who was scratching his head with a claw as they walked the halls of Feoburkana's royal palace. His body language was strangely human for a being that had 6 limbs, a hard carapace, and a tail. Was it out of consideration for the humanoids that they were currently working with? She idly wondered what he was like in the company of his own people. Following the resolution of the frost giant problem, Ilishnish returned to the dwarf capital with Lord Cocytus, his general staff, and the dwarf commander-in-chief. Though the fighting was over, the war council still had work to do, reviewing their strategy, tactics, logistics and putting together all manner of reports. No one displayed any indication that they had anything against this work after work, which went on for days. Ilishnish could only conclude that everyone present was crazy. Lady Shiltir had taken Ladies Aradnik and Sigurd to visit the remaining frost giant populations, delivering the message she had shared with the mob from before. Ilishnish wasn't sure what to make of Sigurd's duel, but Lord Cocytus had plainly been ecstatic. He came with great expectations for a warrior people in these frost giants and had at long last found what he was looking for. As for what he had in store for them, she had no idea. Of Lady Shiltir's actions, Ilishnish could only express her admiration. In a single, masterful move that exploited the very fabric of their culture, she had turned the unyielding frost giant society on its head and supplanted their way of life. She even managed to install the Sorcerer King as their new god. Gazing down at the map of the Azalisia Mountains as their work approached its conclusion, Ilishnish sighed. In the mere span of months, her own reality was turned on its head as well. For over a century, she had lived a life that felt frozen in time by comparison. Her father had been slain, and her family turned into postal delivery staff. She had drawn the scrutiny of a powerful vampire and ended up as the vassal of a human not even a fifth of her age. Now, a life of petdom loomed on the horizon. Ilishnish attempted to weigh what she had gained in exchange, but the scales in her mind lacked the appropriate measures. There was the idea of security and personal safety as long as she kept her head down, and she had undoubtedly acquired new powers and harnessed techniques that substantially enhanced her personal strength. In the face of the Sorceress Kingdom's stupendous might, however, it meant nothing and she had no idea what it might mean in the world beyond. She had been granted authority in exchange for responsibility, and the concepts that drove this notion were entirely alien to her. Gone were the idyllic days where she hunted and slept and explored her little corner of the world. In its place lay everything. A vast, frightening blank lay before her. Ilishnish's original dream of a slow and relaxing life of discovery was replaced by a cold, manicured hand that would keep prodding her into the void from behind for the indeterminate future. The rustle of paper filled the air as sections of the map were lifted from the table. As documents and reports were cleared away, the dwarf commander-in-chief cleared his throat. Ahem, I know it's been a short affair and all, but we're planning a bit of an after-work party. Everyone's welcome, we just need to know who's coming in advance so the proper preparations can be made. After-work party? Lord Cocytus turned his head towards the commander-in-chief. Just a bit of a thing we like to do, the commander-in-chief said. They usually host him after finishing projects or meeting deadlines and such. You know, celebrating an achievement or a pat on the back or something like that. Lord Cocytus looked over the representatives of the Regency Council for a long moment. A few of them broke out into a cold sweat. His voice rolled out as if a grave matter was under consideration, unexpected, but we will attend. Eh? Really? Other matters to discuss. This is an opportunity. His stare appeared to focus entirely on the commander-in-chief. The dwarf swallowed behind his brown beard. Is that so? Was it something important? Yes. Military matters. I see, the commander-in-chief laughed nervously. And people say we dwarves love to work. Well, that's fine with me, it just so happens that I've a few questions of my own as well. The remainder of the materials on the table were stored away, and they filed out into the palace hallway. The local places might be a bit too much of a squeeze for Lord Cocytus here, the commander-in-chief said, so we'll just turn the war room back into a banquet hall. We've already made preparations, but it'll be a couple of hours till the other shift wakes up, so feel free to take a look around the city till then. His relaxed manner caused the representatives of the cabinet secretary and the merchant guild to turn on him. An argument ensued over proper etiquette when it came to foreign dignitaries. Elishnish wandered off, weary of the endless expanse of social rules and proper form. Her reprieve was short-lived, however. In the palace courtyard, she found Lady Shultier and Lady Zaradnik. Accompanying them were Miss Entima and Miss Shizu, who had worked tirelessly for the past few days clearing away all of the potential hazards that Elishnish had marked out for the War Council. She took a deep breath and recomposed herself before approaching them. "Are things finally wrapped up here?" Lady Shiltier asked. "We were just headed up to see if anyone needed a gate back to the Sorcerer's Kingdom." "The dwarves are hosting an event, Lady Shiltier," Elishnish replied. "Some sort of party for everyone who was working with the War Council." "A party?" Miss Entima piped up from the side. "Will there be food?" Elishnish eyed the arachnoid. Though her disguise might be able to fool the senses of humans, it was ineffective against her blind sight. Miss Shizu, too, felt strange, though she couldn't quite put a claw on what exactly she was. When no reprimand came from Lady Shultier or Lady Zaradnik for Miss Entima speaking out of turn, Elishnish decided it was safe to answer her question. "I don't think there's such a thing as a dwarf party without food, Miss Entima." "We helped," Miss Entima said. "Do you think we can go as well?" "Lord Cocytus said he would attend," Elishnish replied, "and it appears that his vassals are staying as well. I don't see why not." "Why tilde?" Miss Entima threw up her hands with a happy noise, skipping up the stairs leading to the palace entrance. Miss Shizu quietly walked off after her. "Will you not be attending as well?" Lady Shiltier asked. Should I?" "It's an opportunity to practice your social skills," Lady Zaradnik said. "I think you should take advantage of it. Unless you're more interested in continuing with your lessons." "I'll stay," Elishnish quickly replied. If she were to choose between eating and Lady Zaradnik's lessons, the former clearly won out. She could only stomach so much of the human lord's lessons in a week. "Make sure you behave yourself," Lady Shiltier warned her. "You're not attending, my lady?" Elishnish asked. "No, I'll be returning to the Sorcerer's Kingdom," Lady Shiltier answered. "Lady Zaradnik wants to get back to her domain. I have something important to take care of, as well." Two more people who could think of nothing but going to work after finishing work. Was she the only sane person around? "Then, have a good evening, Lady Shiltier." Elishnish lowered her head. "Lady Zaradnik." She smiled and waited until they passed out of the courtyard entrance, then turned around and hurried back into the royal palace before they changed their minds and dragged her off. The familiar surroundings of her childhood home comforted her somewhat, but, at the same time, thoughts over an uncertain future shadowed her steps. Ludmilla stepped through the gate and out into the familiar sight of her humble manor in Warden's Vale. Despite the feeling that it had taken far longer, it was barely a week since she had last been home. Did all adventures end up that way? Light steps sounded from behind her as Lady Shiltier followed her through the gate. Ludmilla scanned the interior of the manor, but it appeared that Leluvian was away. "Please have a seat, my lady," she gestured to the dining table. "If you'll excuse me, I'd like to change into something more comfortable." More comfortable and less ripe. The last time she had changed was on the morning before the frost giant ambush. Even on wilderness patrols, one was afforded the time to clean themselves up, so she had never felt quite so icky as she did at that very moment. "Where's your maid?" Lady Shiltier asked. "At home, most likely," Ludmilla answered. "The vampire brides should be out working. It's quiet at night, so they can get more done without interrupting the daily activities of the tenants. Changing clothes on my own won't kill me." If you say so," Lady Shiltier said, taking a seat and waving her away. "Considering how stringent you are with your customs, I believed you were." "Aware of what?" "The way your religion promotes focus on single vocations amongst its faithful," Lady Shiltier explained, "and how the local aristocracy has households that perform various tasks for them. These are both measures to prevent build contamination, are they not?" Ludmilla's hands stopped working over the clasps of her armor. Now that Lady Shiltier mentioned it, various things did make sense from that angle. By leaving mundane tasks to their households, nobles were allowed to focus on their duties. In this manner, they would gain in their levels as nobles without worrying about gaining levels from tasks attributed to their household staff. Even within the organizational structure of a noble household, each staff member tended to be assigned specific roles. As long as they didn't pursue interests outside of what their tasks entailed, their builds would presumably remain uncontaminated. The tenets of her faith promoted this at all levels of society, but she had never really thought about the more complex mechanisms that had been implemented to support this thinking. To her, people should pursue the paths that they showed aptitude in, and that aptitude was heavily influenced by the bloodlines passed down to them. Creating a more advanced societal framework that facilitated what the tenets laid out was a matter she would have to give serious thought to. "You're correct," Ludmilla replied, "but the tenets of my faith don't forbid people from changing their own clothes. With that being the case, I don't think it represents the risk you're suggesting." Her braces came off, followed by her vambraces. She was all too aware of Lady Sheltier watching from her seat not 3 meters away. Over time, it was made clear that she favored women over men. In fact, the only man she professed to pursue romantically was the Sorcerer King. Ludmilla's back was turned to her, but she could easily imagine her liege's open leer. Dealing with the advances of more privileged, higher-ranking individuals was something Riastice's noblewomen had to consider and prepare for. It was, however, primarily men that they had to learn how to politely fend off, so Ludmilla had no idea what to do with Lady Sheltier. If it came down to it, their difference in rank was just too great for Ludmilla to offer any real resistance. Well, it wasn't as if she disliked Lady Sheltier, she was actually very fond of her, but she suspected that too many steps in that direction would end in being bitten. Her liege was looking especially menacing in the last day or so. Immortality was in the offering, but there were still matters she needed to take care of as a human. She would turn 18 in the winter, and while it wasn't required that she had a consort picked out by the age of 20, it was something that she would have to start thinking about. Ludmilla was about to remove her armor, then realized that Sigurd's cowl was still clasped around her neck. She should probably return it. It would be simple enough to figure out where it went once they dug up the avalanche that had buried them. Or maybe he would refuse and wait until he could challenge her for it? Hopefully, that wasn't the case. She set the cowl down carefully on her bed. Her armor came off, and then her doublet and shirt. They didn't smell anywhere near as bad as she imagined that they would. Or perhaps she had become used to it. Ludmilla was bumped forward slightly as cool arms wrapped tightly around her waist. She tensed, feeling Lady Sheltier press against her bare back. Could it be? Lady Sheltier's excited words brushed over her skin. Lady Sheltier," Ludmilla said nervously. "A gift." Lady Sheltier's slender hands started to roam. "For me? From Lord Peroncino? Or from Lord Ines?" "My lady, what? It's all right now, yes?" Lady Sheltier's voice smoldered. "We can enjoy ourselves as much as we want." Ludmilla struggled in Lady Sheltier's embrace, but her liege's arms did not budge in the slightest. "Lady Sheltier," Ludmilla said, "please, wait. I don't understand. What do you mean by gift?" The arms suddenly released her, and she tumbled forward into her bed. Ludmilla reached out to grab the cowl, covering herself before turning around. Lady Sheltier's crimson gaze glowed brightly. Both of her appearances carried a curious expression. "Are you not aware of it yourself?" "Aware of what?" Lady Sheltier furrowed her brow, then let out a bemused sound. "You," she said, "are dead. Undead, to be precise." Ludmilla blinked several times, then checked over herself. She looked to be in one piece. "I don't feel dead." "Well, I don't feel dead either," Lady Sheltier told her with a smirk, "but I assure you that I am 100% undead." "As are you, but I have no idea what you are. Whatever it is, it goes to great lengths to mimic the human that you used to be. I wonder if you can shut everything off? Or is it stuck like that? Not that I dislike it. I love it, in fact." The smirk turned into a supremely pleased smile. Ludmilla's mind whirled. "Undead? Shut everything off?" "If you knew," Ludmilla tried to make sense out of what she was hearing, "why didn't you tell me earlier?" "I didn't," Lady Sheltier replied. "And I had no reason to suspect. The same thing that was blocking attempts to locate you with divination spells was blocking your undead reaction." She pointed at the cowl Ludmilla held over her breast. "Once you took that off, I could tell right away." Ludmilla looked down at the magic item. "From what I could discern," she said, "this item bestows a freedom effect." "I won't dispute your findings," Lady Sheltier said,
but it certainly does more than that.
Lady Shiltir held out her palm.
All appraisal magic item.
Her liege's expression turned curious as she mused over what she saw.
An artifact, she said.
A cowl of warding. This must be one of the mementos that Skuld left with the frost giants.
Then
what does it actually do? There must be a better explanation to what Lady Shiltir claimed of her. Maybe it lay with the magic item.
Several things, Lady Shiltir replied.
The first is a spell-turning effect, which can absorb up to 6 levels worth of spells per day.
It can stop a 6th-tier spell once per day?
Or any combination that adds up to 6. 2 fireballs, 6 lesser cure wounds, 3 shockwaves.
You get the idea.
I see. What else?
Second is the freedom effect that you mentioned.
The third is a mind blank effect. This protects you from mind-affecting spells and abilities,
like your ring.
It also prevents any and all attempts to gather information with spells and abilities. Even super-tier magic will not work if employed against you for that purpose.
This third effect is why Negredo couldn't locate you, and why I couldn't sense that you are now undead.
If someone used a mirror of remote viewing to look at this room, they would only see me, you wouldn't appear at all. I should really return this to Sigurd.
Ludmilla couldn't think of anything else to say.
This item is invaluable. And what happens when you next visit the cathedral? Her mind froze. Are you sure I've become one of the undead? Ludmilla asked weakly. I truly don't feel that this is the case. It's not as if I'd lie to you about it, Lady Shiltir answered, but if you need some proof, do you have a fast healing potion?
The ones imbued with healing spells.
2 of them. Ludmilla retrieved 2 vials filled with blue liquid from her infinite haversack on the bed and handed them over. Lady Shiltir unstoppered the first vial and emptied the contents in her open palm. Rather than the glow of healing magic, a soft hiss filled the air. An acrid odor suffused into their surroundings as a thin wisp of smoke rose between them. The skin of Lady Shiltir's palm discolored slightly before returning to its pristine condition a moment later. She set the vial down, opening the next. Your turn, she said. Ludmilla moved at Lady Shiltir's prompting, then stopped. She licked her lips tentatively. Lady Shiltir smiled. It appears that you already know what will happen, she said. Don't worry, I have plenty of spells that can heal you now. Furrowing her brow, Ludmilla defiantly extended her arm. She faced her palm upwards, as Lady Shiltir had done. Her liege slowly tipped the vial. Stinging pain shot up her arm. No, that wasn't right. It wasn't exactly the same as other injuries she had received in the past. She was aware of that same sensation, but, at the same time, she understood that the whole of herself was being damaged. Before she knew it, Lady Shiltir had emptied the entire vial. Ludmilla shook her hand in a panic, only to find that the potion had eaten straight through to the other side. Tears blurred her vision as she looked down at the gaping hole in her palm. It's just a local alchemist's potion, Lady Shiltir told her in light tones. You can take far more damage than that, at least as much as it took to return you from the brink of death before. Hold still, I'll heal. The hole closed itself, leaving Ludmilla's hand in its previously uninjured condition. Or not. That narrows it down quite a bit. Undead races with regeneration are fairly rare. You don't have red eyes. Did you get any extra pointy teeth? Lady Shiltir's eyes were bright with interest. Ludmilla, however, lowered herself to sit on the edge of her bed. She pressed her palms against her forehead. How did this happen? By dying and getting up again? Lady Shiltir offered. I can't precisely say how it happened, but you should at least have an idea of when. As frequently as you die, it's probably still a distinct experience. Being buried in an avalanche was the only notable event that she could recall. Ludmilla hadn't survived, she had only walked away. 8th day, lower fire month, 0 CE. A tribute, you say? Indeed, Your Majesty. From the boldly expressed words alone, Ainz could almost envision the crisp salute of Pandora's actor. In the form of Moman, however, the doppelganger would do no such thing. While playing out the part of the Dark Warrior, Pandora's actor would not launch himself into the mortifying, over-the-top performances of the Treasury Guardian. Additionally, he could not enact the sort of deferential behavior that the NPCs displayed towards him in public. As such, Ainz ended up in the odd situation where he felt most at ease with the one who normally caused him the most unease.
It was just before noon in Nirantal, and the Sorcerer King walked with darkness through the streets in their regular display before the citizens. As usual, the citizens parted fearfully before the Sorcerer King as he went. After encountering Shiltir and her 2 noble followers weeks ago, he had dared hope that the city was finally warming up to him. However, it had ended up being an isolated incident rather than the indicator of a promising new trend. Their reverence is stifling, but at least the demi-humans offer tributes every once in a while. Ainz sighed. Did he desire the regard of his subjects to the extent that he considered the demi-humans' ritualistic gestures as something that qualified as such? Perhaps it was just the lot of a sovereign, and a certain degree of distance would forever lie between a king and his subjects. Another tribute, Ainz said. Is it really fine for the demi-humans to continue offering them, I wonder? The humans are familiar with taxation, Pandora's actor replied, but the demi-humans are still unaccustomed to any such system. Well, a few demi-human traders that come to the city pay trade taxes and tolls, but that's about the extent of it. Tributes are what the vast majority know, and they have no systems implemented that facilitate the accounting required for taxation in the first place. As much as the administration might desire a larger tax base, the road to full integration will be a long one. Much to Albedo's probable frustration, this much was most likely the case. Even the Quagoa tribes, a unified nation that once numbered the population of a large city, worked on a system of tributes. The tribal leadership of the local demi-humans did not invest in infrastructure or development in the way that humans or dwarves did, so they had no need for taxation. In short, the ongoing tributes that they presented were not the act of citizens dutifully paying taxes, they were gestures that displayed their ongoing submission to his strength. I suppose that's true, Ainz nodded. Still, proper integration is ideal. My desire is for the Sorcerer's Kingdom to be a place where all peoples can live in peace and prosperity. After all, he raised his voice as he spoke, surreptitiously glancing about to see how any nearby citizens reacted to his words. Did their expressions brighten? Were there any demi-humans within earshot? He spotted a human woman looking down fearfully from a shophouse window, cradling a child in her arms. Ainz raised a hand towards her as he passed in the street below, offering a friendly wave. The woman paled and vanished from the window. It'd be nice if they at least didn't run away. TCH. Nobril clicked her tongue. Ainz glanced at the armored figure of Momin. Was he angry as well? As caustic as her attitude was, Nobril at least wore her heart on her sleeve. Pandora's actor, on the other hand, was unreadable behind the heroic facade of the Dark Warrior. He spotted a lizard man in the distance making its way to the demi-human quarter. In addition to Pinison, her fellow dryads, and the treants that accompanied them, the lizardman tribes could technically be considered the oldest citizens of the Sorcerous Kingdom, coming under Nazaric's rule nearly a year before the official founding of the nation. They, too, feared him at first, but as Nazaric poured resources into security and infrastructure, they... Wait a minute, that's bad, isn't it? He had gone from an undead monster to something akin to a god. Would this happen for other demi-humans as well? Tributes would become offerings, while an appetite for blessings in the form of security, infrastructure and food developed as a result. Blue Planet spoke of something similar, once, where primitive societies in Earth's past developed cults around the aid, supplies and material from more advanced civilizations. Ruling was hard. Striking the appropriate balance for a healthy nation was even harder. While the NPCs would probably think it a matter of course that Ainz ul Gaun be worshipped as a god, the idea made him squirm. Why did the world itself seem to be hell-bent on making his existence uncomfortable? Maybe he just needed a break. As he thought upon it, it became more and more of an attractive prospect. His independent ventures always seemed to yield new relationships with the peoples that he came into contact with. Perhaps enough time had passed that an excuse to go somewhere would be acceptable. The summer harvest had passed and the administration compiled the results coming from the territories that employed undead labor, which had turned out just as expected, no, better than expected. Albedo brought various anomalies to his attention, pointing to the existence of previously unknown production classes possessed by the locals. Proof came in the form of the seemingly arbitrary differences between farms managed by humans and those managed by elder liches. Simply put, all else being equal, land managed by human farmers yielded more with the optimal growing conditions arranged by Mare,
The data outlined differences that ranged from 5 to 15%, in 5% increments. When one considered how many skeleton laborers each farming household could manage, even those households in the 5% bracket essentially fed themselves through their class production bonuses alone. It was pure profit for the Sorceress Kingdom. Much to Ainz's relief, Albedo, who once argued that humans should have no hand in the crucial production processes of the nation, promptly withdrew her assertion in light of the new data. Pandora's actor was galvanized by the results, redoubling his efforts to identify more production classes and devise ways to cultivate the Sorceress Kingdom's industrial base. All of Nazarick was awed and humbled by the unfathomable wisdom and foresight of Ainz Ul Gaun, including Ainz Ul Gaun himself. Beyond certain cultural and religious practices that did not grasp the concept in its entirety, the regional populations did not appear to understand that levels and classes existed. Nor did they appear to understand how it dictated every facet of their civilization. It was knowledge definitively possessed only by those from Yggdrasil, as they appeared to be the only such entities in the region, it could be fully exploited to their advantage. Yes, things appeared to be going well. Save for his relationship with his native subjects. Going out and meeting new people could potentially solve that. After facing the endless march of reports and paperwork, it would surely be all right to take a break. But where could he go? Humans felt like a dud. Shortly after he made their acquaintance, they would either distance themselves like Jerkniv, set themselves to work like Heintzsack, or fill their correspondences with tales of their sexual escapades like Nfuya. He didn't even want to think about Fluda. Gorndo and the dwarven runesmiths were certainly thankful towards him, but they, too, had thrown themselves into the revival of their craft. And so, Ainz was once again alone. He supposed that he should count himself fortunate that no one he personally knew put him on an insane pedestal like some sort of god. Ainz considered his options. When it came to the immediate region, he had traveled in every direction but south. South's no good. The theocracy stinks of players, so who knows what dangers lurk there. Demiurge is working in the southwest, so I don't want to accidentally mess with his plans. Southeast. He turned his head, looking up at the skies past the city wall. The Katsa Plains, He had only been there twice. The first time was as Moman, where he had destroyed an undead horde encroaching on the borders of the duchy. The second was the Battle of Katsa Plains. Both were at the fringes of the area, and he had departed shortly after. Ainz recalled the scenery, the mysterious ruins that rose out of the wastes, obscured by an ever-present fog. There were rumors of an abandoned metropolis that stood at its heart, haunted by the ghosts of the past. The place practically screamed at him to be explored. He nodded to himself, the idea set firmly in his mind. He would explore the Katsa Plains, provided he could come up with an excuse to do so. Was there something that draws your Majesty's interest? Ainz focused on his surroundings again, finding himself staring at the sign of the Purple Apothecary. This guy, why would one of the undead be interested in a brothel? Don't tell me. Nabrul was looking at him intently as well. He didn't want to know what that meant. I was thinking about our southeastern border. The consolidation of Countess Wagner's new territory appears to have encountered no problems. A buffer zone of sorts has been established by both Countess Corlin and Countess Wagner. Any wild undead that appear within 5 kilometers of their territories are destroyed by patrols. Wild undead. As part of their ongoing efforts to distinguish the Sorcerer King and his undead servants from the broadly hostile undead of this world, the administration had adopted the term and attempted to make its use widespread. It was, however, a term that only made Ainz want to catch them for some reason. No intelligent undead have appeared? From Katsa? Moman adopted a thoughtful pose. Gem, I haven't heard of any such occurrence since the founding of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. There are rumors of elder liches and the like lurking deep within the plains, but it's all mindless undead around the fringes. The other nations that border the Katsa Plains continue to maintain their own security, so no build-up that leads to the genesis of powerful undead is permitted to occur unless it happens in the deepest parts of the region. What were the chances that he could find one if he went further in? An intelligent undead that wasn't of Nazarick presented many interesting possibilities. An elder lich that had existed for centuries or millennia would be a priceless trove of information, and he could compare such beings to his own summons to discern where their differences lay. For centuries, The nations that bordered the cursed wasteland met with no success when it came to reclaiming the territory for human habitation, but it might be possible to repurpose the place as an undead inhabited territory of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. That was, if they could behave themselves. Undead domination had limits, and undead citizens attacking the living would have an effect that was decidedly the opposite of what he had been working towards. Well, he would just have to see when he got there. A shadow crossed over him, and Ainz looked up. They were passing through the southern gatehouse of the city's second wall. The presentation will be held outside? Yes, Your Majesty, Pandora's actor replied. I believe the information about it should have come to your attention last week. It ended up being a collaboration of sorts, but it originally started as a gesture of appreciation from the Dwarf Kingdom for the reclamation of Feoburkana and the Sorceress Kingdom's assistance with their migration. Ah, that, Ainz at least thought he had read something like that. You mentioned that it was a collaboration. Who else was involved? The Frost Giants, Pandora's actor said. The addition of their artisans sped up the process remarkably. The Frost Giants. Now that was a memorable report. Through what appeared to be the influence of a player from the distant past and a twist of fate involving Cocytus and Chiltia, the Frost Giant tribes of the Azalizia Mountains had gone from a threat to merchant traffic to loyal subjects of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. Losses were both minimal and easily replaced, while Ainz considered the gains immeasurable. The NPCs had realized much in the way of positive growth and had probably gained confidence in their new responsibilities. As a bonus, the Sorcerer's Kingdom had grown due to their actions, extending its sphere of influence over the Azalizia Mountains and the races that inhabited the area. Do you have any thoughts on whether Frost Giants might contribute to the Sorcerer's Kingdom? Ainz asked as they made their way through the military district. Their seafaring capability strikes me as the most promising aspect of their people, Pandora's actor replied. Your foresight on the matter was quite magnificent. Huh? My foresight? The visit to the Dwarf Kingdom. Your promise to establish a trade link between their nation and ours with Minister Bloodfallen in attendance. The establishment of the Sorcerer's Kingdom's new army and the beginning of the Adventurer Guild's expeditions. I find it highly doubtful that so many disparate moving pieces can come together so perfectly without the hand of a supreme architect guiding it from behind the scenes. As Moman spoke, Ainz started counting the pebbles at his feet. So many moving pieces, Pandora's actor shook his head, and so many objectives fulfilled at once. In the end, you have secured the Sorcerer's Kingdom's access to the Northern Ocean and brought a powerful seafaring people into the fold to operate its vessels. Our southern logistics will benefit as well. There has been a need for serviceable vessels in the Katza River system. The most productive territories of the Sorcerer's Kingdom will become even more so, and with the ability to navigate the Katza River comes access to the inland sea and the southeast. I see. That's why you were considering our southeastern border. With such a masterful hand at its helm, a truly bright future awaits this nation. Ainz sighed, speechless at the impossibly convenient web of connections that was laid out by Pandora's actor. I need to hire this master architect. I wonder if someone can introduce me to him? A bit down the road from Rantel's south gate, Ainz was led to a raised platform built to face the city. Standing atop it were Aura and Mare, who brightened at his appearance. Ainz Summer. Aura called down cheerfully while waving a hand over her head. He joined them on the platform, and a row of figures seated along the back rose to their feet. Aside from Cocytus, at least one of them looked familiar, the commander-in-chief of the dwarf army. Upon recognizing him, he thought he remembered the others. Behind them stood the members of Nazareth that functioned as support staff in the city. Several guild masters from the city were in attendance as well. Many visibly tensed at his appearance. Veiled looks of grave concern were cast in his direction as he knelt down and patted the brightly smiling twins on the head. Yep, look at me, I'm your friendly neighborhood sorcerer king. Even children love me. He rose once again, surreptitiously gauging the delegation's reactions as he approached their seats. As adorable as it was, this act was not effective on the citizens, who were well aware of Aura and Mare's association with him. Ainz waited patiently to try it with the children of his subjects, who were able to adapt to their new circumstances with the flexibility that children had, but their parents kept ushering them away before he could get close. Your Majesty, the cabinet secretary greeted him. It's an honor to meet you once again on such an auspicious day. Heinz wasn't sure what was so auspicious about it, but he returned the cabinet secretary's greeting with his painstakingly practiced air of regal dignity. As he did so, he noticed a line of wagons forming on the road. "Hey, they're blocking traffic for this? Is this my fault? Because I take my walks at this time of day?" The lowly salaryman within him wanted to run over and apologize profusely for the inconvenience that he had caused. He understood that it was an official function between the Sorceress Kingdom and a friendly nation, but he didn't think there was a need for everything to revolve around his daily schedule. What were they presenting him with, anyway? He racked his memory for the paperwork from last week that Pandora's actor had mentioned, but came up empty. It definitely existed somewhere. The event wouldn't have been organized without him putting his seal of approval on it. Heinz took his seat and leaned over towards Pandora's actor. "We appear to be missing a few officials," he said in a low voice. "Minister Bloodfallen is on the other side, overseeing the delivery of the tribute. Demiurge is away as usual. The Prime Minister is." Pandora's actor chuckled. "Well, let's just say that the entire affair has ignited the fires of competition within her." Unable to ask without appearing ignorant of the matter at hand, Heinz turned his attention forward to look at the city gate for any clues as to what was going on. Were those there before? 2 stone mounds had been raised and leveled off to either side of the gate. His mind recalled the designated locations where demi-human tribes placed their tributes, consisting of flowers, fruits, meat, simple crafts, unrefined precious metals and stones, and imagined giant piles of them stacked at the gate. No, dwarves aren't demi-humans. Since it's a collaborative effort, maybe it's a fusion of some sort? The Dwarf Kingdom's cabinet secretary launched himself into a droning speech extolling the virtues of the Sorcerer King. As he went on about friendship, prosperity and a bright future between their 2 nations, the vision of an archway came to Heinz's mind. That might make sense. A finely sculpted stone archway that symbolized the good relations that the Sorceress Kingdom had with its neighbors. He added flowers to it for good measure. "Your Majesty." Heinz looked away from the gate, towards the cabinet minister who was inviting him to the front of the platform. The assembled dignitaries stood as he made his way. He watched the city gate intently, curious over what would be presented. A black line appeared in the middle of the road leading through the city entrance, which widened to span the entire gatehouse. It continued to grow, blocking off the entire view of the southern wall. A gate? Why is it so big? Are they using Gargantua to move something? No, it's too short for Gargantua to fit through. As wide as it was, the gate was only half again as tall as Rantal's outer wall. A number of dwarves came through, and Mare hopped down to join them. A crimson figure flew out of the gate, Shelter in her armor. She circled the area twice before coming to hover in front of the portal. The people below her cleared away. 6 massive beings slowly made their way out of the gate, and Heinz could feel their shuddering steps all the way from the platform. Frost giants, He had seen them before. Too many times, in fact. This was, however, in Yggdrasil, where they existed in the same region as ice dragons, a popular farming target for high-level players. While this was not Yggdrasil, the frost giants in the Azalisia Mountains looked very much the same, barring their shoddy-looking equipment. It was perhaps due to Heinz's perception of frost giants in Yggdrasil, basically a nuisance trash mob that distracted one from the ice dragons that were the main target, that he had not given their presence much thought during his visit to the region. The giants came forward, gripping metal poles in either hand. A stone base appeared. "Ah, so this must be the, eh?" Voices of admiration rose around him, but Heinz was overwhelmed in his effort to process what he saw. What the hell is this? These aren't pillars for an arch, these are, me? They made statues of me? No. Why are they so huge? And the details, they look even better than I do. Do I have a stalker? It was all he could do to keep his jaw from dropping open as he gripped the railing of the platform. The frost giants continued forward, joined by more who supported the 2 statues from the sides and the rear. The gate closed once they cleared it, and they set the statues down on the mounds fashioned for them. Mare pattered forward, using magic to fuse the base of each statue to its foundations. Applause filled the air. Heinz could only stand stock still as his mortification was suppressed over and over again. What happened to the archway? The flowers? What would people think of a ruler who put such ludicrously large statues of himself in front of the nation's capital? No, this isn't my fault. I didn't ask. Shaltira alighted before him, lowering her head in reverence. "In summer," she said. "The representative from the Frost Giant tribes would like to come and pay his respects, aren't you?" Oh. Ainz cleared his throat. "Very well. Bring him before me." Shaltir turned and nodded towards the Frost Giants, who had lined up before the two statues. One that stood a head above the rest came forward. He was clad in midnight black armor that gleamed in the noonday sun. In his hand was a massive, two-handed axe that appeared to be fashioned out of crystalline ice. The giant smoothly went to a knee, long hair falling about his shoulders as he bowed his head. Even so, he was of a height with the 4-meter-tall platform. "Your Majesty," his voice boomed against the walls, "I am Sigurd, son of Sigmund, champion of the Frost Reaver tribe. On this day, we have come to offer you this tribute, and the eternal loyalty of our people." He has the same name as that quest NPC. I wonder if there's any connection. Ainz nodded regally. "That your people have come under my reign pleases me. Tell me, Sigurd, son of Sigmund, what is it that you desire for your people?" "Glory." Ainz's eyes flared. "Glory," Sigurd's voice rose. "To reclaim the lost strength of our ancestors, to take our rightful place in this world. We will sail every sea, conquer every glacier and berg in your name. Our warriors will flock to your banner in war to bring wrath and ruin to your enemies. We are your servants, from now until the end of days." Ho! After months of cringing, reserved interactions, and fearful reverence, Sigurd's boldness was a breath of fresh air. It was not the self-serving greed of a petty despot. It was the brilliant ambition of a man reaching out for the glories of the past so they would shine once again in the present and the future. Cocytus. "Ha! I believe Sigurd and his people are right up your alley." Cocytus bent at the waist, lowering his gaze to the floor. "By your will, in summer," he said. "They will be excellent. For the army. The navy? I will leave that to your discretion," Ainz said with a wave of his hand, "though we do indeed lack a navy. Spare no effort to develop the capabilities of our armed forces." Following the closing statements of the presentation, Ainz found himself in the company of the guardians and the dwarven dignitaries. After another glance at the statues, he addressed the cabinet secretary. "These statues are quite grand," he said. "While I appreciate the gesture from the Dwarf Kingdom, I hope that resources were not diverted from your ongoing restoration efforts." "No, Your Majesty," the cabinet secretary replied. "It had been improper to delay our appreciation for the aid that you so graciously offered us. We were more than happy to get to work on it, and the addition of the Frost Giant artisans moved our schedule forward considerably, as well. It didn't sound like they had used any undead labor for the project. That was a shame. New applications for the Sorceress Kingdom's labor exports would have been welcome for their marketing efforts." "By the way," Ainz asked, "out of all the different possibilities for this monument, was there a reason why you settled on the statues?" "That's, at first we thought about making an archway for the city entrance, but Lord Cocytus mentioned something about a statue." Shaltir, she spoke of a statue. I heard it from Moman." Ainz's head snapped over to face Pandora's actor. "Did your Majesty not mention something about a modest statue?" The Dark Warrior looked back at him. I did? This is my fault?" "No, wait, how is this modest?" Something else tugged at him. "You mentioned the fires of competition and the Prime Minister." "Yes, Your Majesty. She's thrown herself into planning the next set of statues. I hear they're to be 10 times larger." Did Rantle even have room for multiple 100-meter statues? It was a fortress city, not some sprawling metropolis like the cities of Earth's past. "Humph, she's just jealous that someone else has made such an excellent tribute ahead of her." Shaltir placed a hand lightly over her breastplate. "Albedo plans on trying to overwhelm our heartfelt offering, but she won't deceive anyone with those monstrosities of hers." What were we talking about again?" In summer," Shaltir spoke up again. "Before you return, there's someone I would like to introduce you to, aren't you, Ara? Where did she go?" "I found her." In a field outside of Rantle, Shaltir brushed back the strands of her silver hair being tousled by the wind. "Where is she?" "She's at the grove outside the adventurer training area," Aura told her. "Did something happen, aren't you?" Shaltir asked, To disappear like that is completely unlike her, aren't you? You should probably go see for yourself, or it turned a suspicious eye on her. You didn't do anything to her, did you? Me? I haven't forced her to do anything. She's been depressed beyond measure recently, and it's a real turn-off. I'm supposed to be the one that... Okay, I don't need to hear that. Anyway, it doesn't look like she's going to move from there, so... Aura let out a sigh, and Shiltir frowned to herself as she flew off towards the adventurer training area. Since Baroness Aradnik's mysterious and unexpected race change, the once stoic and intrepid noblewoman had withdrawn into herself. Rather than rejoicing over her newfound immortality as many mortals might, she lamented her lost humanity. She became a quivering ball of uncertainty, remaining almost exclusively within the borders of her domain. Desperately afraid of what others would think of her, she begged Shiltir not to let anyone know. What's so bad about being undead, anyways? Shiltir huffed. By and large, the undead were superior to their mortal counterparts. They weren't bound by the needs of the living. They didn't get tired or wear out. Ludmilla would no longer physically age and had transitioned into her new existence right as she fully bloomed into adulthood. Outwardly, the young Baroness appeared to perfectly mimic a human, much to Shiltir's delight. Like a vampire, Ludmilla's race enjoyed all of the pleasures that life offered and perhaps, like a vampire, taste new pleasures unknown to the living. As long as Ludmilla didn't receive any clear and visible injuries and didn't give away her undead capabilities, it was impossible to tell the difference. That was as far as Shiltir could tell so far, anyway. Her once human vassal did not match any undead that she knew of, nor did any racial entry in Peroncino Summer's encyclopedia exist that matched beyond some cursory similarities. She had started making an entry of her own, somewhat proud of the idea that she was continuing her creator's work. Shiltir landed at the edge of the grove surrounding the adventurer training area. It did not take long to find her vassal. She was sitting between the roots of a tree, face buried in her knees. Ludmilla? She called out as she approached. Ludmilla? Why did you disappear like that? I thought you were looking forward to finally meeting Ein Summer in person. She knelt and placed a hand on Ludmilla's shoulder, then her eyes widened when she looked up to face her. I'm sorry, my lady, a tear rolled down Ludmilla's cheek. I'm so sorry. Her face was flushed, her pupils widened to dark pools within her brown irises. Through her thumb, lightly laid over the side of Ludmilla's neck, Shiltir could feel her warm pulse hammering away. Despite the signs of her excitement, she looked utterly miserable. Ein Summer almost always wore a ring of non-detection to prevent scrying and other attempts at divination, as well as to conceal his overwhelming presence and power from the inhabitants of this world. Unfortunately for Ludmilla, the magic item was powerless against her talent. Shiltir closed her eyes, recalling her master's obsidian radiance, the overflowing font of dark energy that billowed forth from her beloved. There was no way that even a level 100 undead being like Shiltir could resist. Her lips turned up slightly, and she gave Ludmilla's shoulder a gentle squeeze. It's all right, she said in reassuring tones. Anyone who doesn't get wet from that must have something wrong with their heads. Night fell over Warden's Vale, though Ludmilla had retired to her home long before the sun lowered itself over the western ridge. She was curled up in bed, lying motionless as she stared at nothing in particular. She was frightened and confused over her situation, uncertain over what it entailed or what it meant. Even the question of who she was plagued her. Was she Ludmilla Zaradnik, or did Ludmilla Zaradnik meet her end in the Azalizia Mountains? If so, was she some sort of imposter? Was there some nefarious reason behind her existence? The weeks that had passed since she discovered her undead state were mostly uneventful, but they also did nothing to lay any of her worries to rest. That she didn't even know what she was frightened her and what the answer might be frightened her all the more. Would she one day lose control of herself to some undead impulse and indiscriminately attack her own subjects? Would people slowly sicken and grow weaker the longer they remained nearby? Would the life that had come before fade away to be replaced by the life of the being that she now was? Though she had learned much about the undead in the past few months, she did not know what being undead meant. She only realized what changes had occurred over time, and worried over what else she might find out. One of the first things that Ludmilla came to understand was that she had gained some sort of additional sense for negative energy. This sense was far stronger than any feel for the undead and their environs that regular humans possessed. She wasn't sure if it was unique to her or if it was something all undead had. She could feel other undead working nearby, as well as the occasional patches of negative energy over the land. This sense appeared to be inexorably tied to her other senses, and she eventually realized why Lady Shiltir appeared as she did after Ludmilla became undead. The greater the presence of ambient negative energy, the more evident it was in the scenery. The more powerful an undead being, the greater the aura it presented to her senses. It did not obscure her vision, as with her true sight, it was simply something she understood was there at the same time. This brought her to her current crisis. For the first time, she was presented with the opportunity for an audience with the Sorcerer King. Despite being afforded the great privilege, the dark radiance that flowed from him was overwhelming, and Ludmilla had fled lest she be overwhelmed by the sensations that assailed her. Awe, adoration, arousal. That last was the worst, and she hated herself for it. Though Lady Shiltir had assured her that it couldn't be helped, it still felt like a vile betrayal to Ludmilla. It would be better if she never saw him again. With a frustrated noise, she rolled around on her bed. She hid her face in a pillow, trying to exorcise the memory of the Sorcerer King from her mind. It was futile. How could an insignificant individual such as herself push away the existence of an undead god? A sigh drifted out, and Ludmilla turned her head to absently eye the texts arranged on her bedstand. An undead god. Lady Shiltir all but worshipped him and speculated over whether Ludmilla's current state was due to the Sorcerer King. The demi-human tribes built altars and made offerings in his name. The lizardmen called him the god of death, a deity that had descended upon a troubled land, offering the people inviolable sanctuary. A tear rolled over the bridge of her nose as she wrestled with her feelings, but what she had experienced could not be denied. At the end of it all, she was left with a single, haunting question. Human souls were the purview of the god of death. If she was indeed still herself, and her soul had been allowed to manifest in its new existence, did that make Ainzul Gaon, the Sorcerer King, Sursana?